Hello everyone, myself Mr. Namit Kudatarkar, Assistant Professor from Department of Pharmacology, KLE College of Pharmacy, Belgavi. So today I am going to discuss about the adrenergic neurotransmission and its receptors. Learning objectives. By the end of the topic, the learners will be able to know the synthesis, storage and release of adrenergic neurotransmitters, characteristics of the adrenergic neurotransmitters. Now coming to the synthesis, storage and release of neurotransmitters. So the first thing what we are going to see here is the how the adrenergic neurotransmitter is being synthesized. So for the synthesis of adrenergic neurotransmitters, there is an amino acid which is required called as tyrosine. So this tyrosine will enter the presynaptic neuron with the help of a transporter called as aromatic L-amino acid transporter. So you will find it here. Now this tyrosine is converted to L-dopa, that is dihydroxyphenylalanine, in the presence of an enzyme called as tyrosine hydroxylase. So now this L-dopa which has been formed again, it will get converted to form dopamine in the presence of an enzyme called as aromatic L-amino acid decarboxylase. So the dopamine which is formed here will enter the presynaptic vesicle. So this vesicle is just a storage compartment. So this vesicle consists of a transporter which we call it as also just like a gate. So this gate or this transporter is called as a VMAT, that is vesicular monoamine transporter. So what this vesicular monoamine transporter will do is it will take up this dopamine into the vesicle. Now, once this dopamine has entered the presynaptic vesicle inside here, this dopamine will get converted to form norepinephrine in the presence of an enzyme dopamine beta hydroxylase. So this takes place into this vesicle. So now what has been formed here? That norepinephrine is been formed here. Now this norepinephrine is been stored into this vesicle. So whenever there is a nerve impulse, that will cause an action potential which will lead to the opening of this calcium channel, okay, into the presynaptic neuron. So the extracellular component, excess of extracellular calcium which is present here will enter the presynaptic neuron here with the help of this calcium channel. And when there is excess amount of calcium into the presynaptic neuron, that will lead to the uh, exocytosis. So before that, what will happen here is this vesicle which is present here, it will move towards the presynaptic neuronal end terminal, and then it will cause exocytosis. That means whatever the norepinephrine is being here, it will be thrown outwards from the presynaptic neuron. Now, there are three criteria. The first criteria is that it will go and bind to the postsynaptic neurotransmitters. Sorry, not postsynaptic neurotransmitters, postsynaptic receptors, which are present on the postsynaptic neuron here. So here you can see this one is the first criteria. The second criteria will be it will go and bind to the presynaptic autoreceptors here. It is alpha 2 receptors. So, and the third criteria will be it will be taken up back by the presynaptic neuron, and with the help of the this monoamine oxidase, which is a mitochondrial enzyme, it will start to degrade this norepinephrine. Now it will degrade to form what? And it will form 3,4 dihydroxy phenyl glycoaldehyde, which is abbreviated as DOPGL. So it is not been shown here in this diagram. So with the help of this monoamine oxidase enzyme, it will form what? DOPGL. So this was all about the adrenergic neurotransmission, that is synthesis, storage and release. So coming to the next slide, that is in this slide we will see the characteristics of adrenergic receptors. So now Now there are different types of adrenergic receptors, out of which there are two alpha receptors, that is alpha 1 and alpha 2 receptors, and then there are three beta receptors, that is beta 1, beta 2 and beta 3 receptors. Now alpha 1 receptor is mainly found in the vascular smooth muscles and visceral smooth muscles. So how does it act? It mainly acts by GQ protein coupled receptors. So this mainly act on the GQ receptors, okay, which leads to activation of the phospholipase C and then activation of IP3 and DAG. So agonist potency you can see here. Epinephrine is greater or equal to norepinephrine is greater or much greater than isoproterenol. So what are the physiological effects? So whenever this norepinephrine comes and binds to the alpha 1 receptors, you can see that there will be effects such as smooth muscle contractions, gluconeogenesis and vasoconstriction. So agonists for alpha 1 receptors are norepinephrine, phenylephrine and methoxamine, and antagonists for alpha 1 receptors are doxazosine, phentolamine and prazoxine. Alpha 2 receptors, these are mainly found in the presynaptic terminals, pancreas, platelets, ciliary epithelium and salivary glands. Mechanism of action will be, it mainly activates the GI of the G protein receptors and it inhibits the adenyl cyclase. The agonist potency is epinephrine is greater or equal to norepinephrine, which is much greater than the isoproterenol. Physiological effects is activation of these alpha 2 receptors will lead to the inhibitions, it inhibits the release of neurotransmitters. Agonists for alpha 2 receptors are clonidine and monoxidine. Antagonists for alpha 2 receptors are yohimbine, idazoxine and tolazolone. Beta 1 receptors are mainly found in the heart, kidney and some presynaptic terminals. Mechanism of action is it activates the GS of the G protein receptors. It leads to the activation of the adenyl cyclase and activation of protein kinase A. Agonist potency will be isoproterenol will be greater than epinephrine is greater than or equal to norepinephrine. Physiological effects, it will increase the heart rate and renin secretion. Agonist for beta 1 receptors are isoproterenol, norepinephrine and dobutamine, whereas antagonists are propranolol, metoprolol and atenolol. Beta 2 receptors are mainly found in the visceral smooth muscles, bronchioles, liver, skeletal muscles. Mechanism of action, it activates the GS of the G protein receptors, which further leads to the activation of adenyl cyclase and protein kinase A activation, and also leads to the activation of calcium channels. So agonist potency is isoproterenol is greater than epinephrine is greater than norepinephrine. Physiological effects are vasodilation, bronchodilation, inhibits insulin secretion, and agonists for beta receptors are isoproterenol, salbutamol, salmeterol, albuterol, formoterol, terbutaline, and levalbuterol. Antagonists for beta 2 receptors are propranolol, ICI 118, 551, nadolol, and butoxamine. Beta 3 receptors are only found in the adipose tissue. The mechanism is it activates the GS of the G protein receptors, which leads to the activation of adenyl cyclase and protein kinase A activation. Agonist potency is isoproterenol is equal to norepinephrine, which is much greater than epinephrine. Physiological effects are it increases the lipolysis, and agonists are isoproterenol, amibegron, and solabegron. Antagonists are SR59230A. So these are the characteristics of the adrenergic receptors. Thank you.